First contact I had at the barras was through my mammy, because she used to buy all her clothes at the barras. She had 5 weans and no a lot of money, so she used to have to go to the barras to buy everything we needed. Best it was, so good frocks down there, you know, nice frocks. Only thing you really couldn't get was socks and knickers and things like that. They were always hard to get. Nobody ever threw them out or gave them away. I think we used them at the end.
To me, a Glaswegian speaks more or less English with a very strong local accent, of course. He throws in Scots words occasionally, but they're not very rich. His vocabulary is not very rich. The Scots of industrial Scotland has really lost its structure. It's a kind of hodgepodge. It's very difficult to call it Scots except at a remote degree.
It's the language of rural people uprooted by oppressive historical circumstances, living in a new environment and dreadful conditions in the city, trying to live a decent life and bring up the children to be good human beings against all this adversity. I suppose Glaswegian has a repertoire of ways of expressing anger and hostility.
Where are you going?
Easter House.
Where do you come from? Easter House. Oh, Jesus Christ. Play it take with hatchets. Tell Davy. There's a nice wee bit. Easter House, sir. You got a pad up there, bring your own gun. Tell you, there's another nice wee bit there, 36-inch. Smashing. Do for your toilet. It's a short drop. Here, tell you, something by the whole lot to give you special bargain. Here's a bit of mother-in-law. There you are, hen choker. Here. There's a nice wee bit there in champagne. Well, look at the size of it. No, the curtains, my son.
The majority of Scots live in cities and speak a tongue which is both Scots and English, but not enough of either to satisfy purists. Here, the original Scots dialect, Standard English, and the speech of thousands of Highland and Irish immigrants have all melded together.
Anybody here for Parkhead want a windy smash? It is no longer than 12. Here for Parkhead, surrender. Have you got your eyebrows? No surrender.
It's also the language of mothers and fathers talking to their children. It's the language in which people make love and get married. It's the language in which older people recollect the past.
The only thing I can remember ever having a lovely dance float was one time I went in the barras. I think it was for the May. You know, everybody get dressed the first Sunday in May. Well, we couldn't get dressed. So she went down there and bought me a lovely taffeta frock, sticking out all lovely pink. And she brought it home and she washed it and ironed it and starched it. All starched, dipped it, and it stuck out a mile. I really thought it was lovely. As I said, no socks again. So I had to get a pair of shoes and round the barras, and what she got was a pair of ice skating boots. They put the skates on, of course, you know, buttoned off-roads up your leg. And I went out like that. I thought it was a toff. I mean, I really believed I was lovely. I used to turn around and swing around so the taffeta frock could jump out a bit. Beautiful, I thought it was lovely.
If people say that they don't like Glasgow dialect, I think what they're really saying is they don't like the Glasgow working class. I don't suppose the Glasgow working class like them much either.
Oh, dearie me, the world's so divided, him that works the hardest, I will is provided. But I'm in bed contented, dark days are fine, but there's no much pleasure living up in 10 and 9. Oh dear.
In Dundee, most folks speak Scots, but for many it's a dialect redolent of struggle and poverty, truths the middle class want to ignore and sections of the working class forget.
Mother says, come on, we'll go around the Green Market and see. Oh, I hated the old place, the smell and everything. Went around, there was this blue cult jacket. She says, oh, that's a good one. How much is it? And the wifey says, 5 bob. And mother says, oh, I didn't ken. Then she says, there's a green in there, how much is that? She says, I'll tell you what, I'll give you the twad number 7 and 6. See the green in hazel. Erm's doing it there, right doing what was I like? Laddie, she didn't even ask if it was a lassie's cult jacket. It was a laddie's cult jacket, that didn't matter. No. As long as it was 12 for 7 and 6, I had to wear that. That and this long kilt that didn't fit me, that belonged to laddie doing the stair.
At the time my granny was alive, it was great. Granny ruled the house.
Oh,
the men come in on a Friday, give Granny their pie, she dished it out.
Is that when they were single?
The house.
Is that
Oh,
when they
no,
were
that's
single?
when they were married. I mean,
Does she still control it when they were married?
Granny controlled the whole house, says all. Father came in on a Friday, gave her his spice. She dished out his pocket money, kept the house going. The minute she died, my father just walked out. See, this was it. They kept the house hard.
It was the women that run the whole place.
Aye.
That's what everybody says about Dundee. Kind of the men, the kettle boilers.
There are many people in Scotland that think of the rural dialects as being the authentic Scots, the real old good Scots, the good braid Scots, the mother tongue, whereas they think of the city dialects as just coarse, as they say in Aberdeen, coarse and slovenly and not very nice to listen to, not real Scots at all.
Why is that?
It's partly because the city dialects have fairly recently arisen, just since the Industrial Revolution, whereas the rural dialects have existed for hundreds of years. It's partly because people have a kind of romantic tendency to associate the rural dialects with the wide open spaces and the sunshine and the fields.
As I get up the Harvard photography, I'm a 10 with Jimmy Brown with him at a degree. So I guess with Jimmy Brown the year 91 to get him a guy second pair and be his or a man to my hey dum do to my hey do day, hey dum do to my hey do day. No, on the following morning I get to the Ploo, but long a losing time my Perry got my roo. Ach, the Ploo she was no working well.
Even in the Ferntune heartlands of Buchan, the culture that produced the Bothie ballads is in the past. Duncan Muirden recalls the heyday.
It was grand when there was a hillock of folk in the farms. You'd some great four nests in the chamber. And you would have played the melodeon and you would have sang and did all the kind of loony capers or that was fashionable in the days gone by. But that things are all wow. But we in Clet had an organisation called the Young Men's Club, which was instigated by a shopkeeper, you see. And that was another great thing for the country loans. Not only did we get our own farm loans gathering there in a fortnight, but we'd have a hot relay there loans for out a boat. And well, we get through all the different antics and games that was prevailing at that time.
In the days, everybody, I suppose, spoke Buchan Scotch. What's the situation nowadays?
Oh, it's a naff change. We are spoke it, and I think spoke it real well, but we wasn't encouraged to speak it at the school, nor was we encouraged to use it in the speech making at the young farmers. We was out there to try and make ourselves on our steed, and if we was going to do that, we had to forget about our native tongue.
I mind this wifey, she used to come and bide my Uncle Willie's every summer, and she was the wife of an Aberdeen lawyer, and she was pretty posh to me, I suppose, at the time. And I mind her said to me, "Margaret, you've got the brains to go far, but that dreadful voice will hold you back."
Millions of Europeans thole a similar dichotomy. One country's language is another's uncouth dialect, if it's the minority who speak it. The real linguistic map of Europe is more complex than the big countries admit.
It's absolutely necessary to take the political factor into account. Scots is similar to English but different. If Scots were the language of an autonomous state, it would be classed as a different language. Norwegian and Danish, I believe, are quite a useful comparison. They're mutually intelligible. A Norwegian and a Dane can conduct a conversation, each speaking his own language. If there were two comparably similar speech forms spoken in the one country, they would be classed as different dialects of the same language. But because they're spoken in different countries under different flags, they're called different languages. Norwegian was nothing but a set of peasant dialects, but when Norway became independent, they concocted an official Norwegian language out of these dialects, and they established it as one of their two national languages. They still use Danish, or Dano-Norwegian as it's called, but they have this new Norwegian language, Nynorsk, as an alternative national language.
Once, children speaking Catalan were punished and told habla cristiano, speak the language of Christians, Spanish for talk proper. With autonomy, Catalans now have their own television service.
From the Radio Scotland newsroom, this is Bill Jack with the 6 o'clock news.
Scots, on the other hand, is broadcast so rarely that the dialects of Lancashire, New York or Oxbridge are much more readily understood.
I would say that the media in Scotland do far from enough service to the Scottish language and other aspects of Scottish tradition, like Scottish literature, which tie up with language, of course. There's very little exposure of that on the media. Another criticism I would level at the Scottish media is that the accents, which are still preferred, though happily rather less than once were, are not Scottish. They come from southern England.
The committee says the government must provide a long-term strategy and more money. And it says
we are so conditioned to accept the ascendancy of an accent few have that an alternative is almost unimaginable.
Radio Scotland News. New the news in Scots. English listeners, Manri June to VHF. A House of Commons committee for Home Affairs has again wailed drugs as the mace Dugsome Fae, the young of the country, has it defect against in time of peace. The committee found muckle fault with the government's attempt to red up the problem.
Historically, the media has only ever coped with Scots language, some say Scots culture, in terms of cliché. In a typical old newsreel, a pucka English commentator puts inverted commas around his quaint Scots words.
One of these sour plums looks sweet. Mr. Chapman, the braw lad, and Miss May Noble, the braw lass, attend the borough chambers to receive into their safekeeping for the day the historic flag of the bordered town. The provost, with well-chosen words, hands it to the braw lad, who brings it down to his lady. Sour plum, you call her. Och. And the flag rides between them.
Being the patois of the lower orders, Scots was an acceptable and very successful medium for comedy, so Scotch comedians became an institution, peddling even more clichés and stereotypes. Harry Lauder, the father of them all.
Last night after strolling we got in at 9:30, and sitting at the kitchen fire I asked her to be mine. When she promised I got up and I danced the heel and fling. I've just been to the jeweller's and I bought her a bonny wee ring. By jingo, wait a some of you lasses get your E on this ring. Oh, it'll be a surprise when I show you what I've been doing with my money. I must have it because I paid for it. Oh, because I wouldn't pay for a ring and then come out and leave it lying there. No, you never hear tell of a Scotchman doing a thing like that.
When TV came along in the 50s, it was the Scotland of the music hall that appeared on screen. The carefree kiltie was what London wanted and Scotland delivered. After it had refined the language of the songs a wee bit, of course.
£2 bob out of £2. What is this, a ski resort?
Well, if your friend's going to have fancy drinks.
Oh, here, missus. Keep it. Gas yourself away. You can do the talk of the wise shoes. Cheers. Come on, Bill.
Take it easy, Hen. I didn't even notice she did that.
Did you know?
No, I didn't, did I?
I don't know, dear.
Well, I didn't.
Oh, aye. When does your face take on the house?
Hey, what's going on here?
It's okay.
Urban Scots is now acceptable for broadcast, providing it's spoken by the network's other Scottish stereotype, the Glasgow hard man. The sensational side of city life often makes the screen because it reinforces the outsider's narrow view of us.
Come on, take it easy, Jake. Noising up his lassie. That's my bird. Serves you right.
While Scotland's history, language and literature in general, and its working class culture in particular, are given little credence in the media, the same can be said for other institutions like the universities, where you'd expect the culture of all the people to be treated seriously.
I was a wee bit stunned when I went to the fabled fortress of learning and realised, in my terms anyway, what I was offered as literature excluded the majority of the people that I came from. And it was like a body of evidence in which, 98% of the witnesses are never called. I don't think that's true of Scottish literature. I think there is a more radical demand throughout Scottish literature to allow the voice of those who may not write themselves to be validly heard.
I mind it in the first year at university, that this really amazed me. One tutorial we got into, and I mean the man had never seen us before, so he didn't know anything about us. And I noticed that he made a difference between the two groups in the class, and I couldn't think, you know, what exactly it was that was making him treat one group very offhand and treat the other group, you know, in an ordinary way. And it couldn't have been that he didn't like females, because there was a female in that group that he was nice to. And the only explanation I could come up with was that it was in terms of accent, because the group that he was being nice to, they were RP speakers, you know, very posh, and the group that he was being very offhand to were all regional speakers, which I was in, of course. And after he'd marked the first essay or two, his attitude changed, and he started treating us all, you know, much the same then. And it was as if he'd said to himself, well, you know, they're not quite as thick as they sound.
Not what you say, but how you say it pigeonholes you in Scotland. I mean, all Edinburgh lawyers talk proper, don't they?
Shuey, how's it going, China? Jazzer, you beauty. All the birds out to play at one time, eh?
Correct.
Hey, I've just seen your ma and your da. Any messages?
Aye. Your ma's got her eye on a wee crepe machine number by the orange Jenner's window. It's a nice enough cup. But Gianni Versace's got that darling panache by, you know. And of course, the new collection's out next week.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, Jazzer. And that Versace will no clash with her Nina Ricci perfume, you know. And she needs that Nina Ricci because of the weight of his Bessie's bag she hums.
Oh, look at the state of this.
I'm defending that this afternoon. You're set then, son?
Yeah, okay, right. I think so, but do you think I'll get let off with a warning?
Look, son, you're a nice enough boy and that. But what lets you down is your voice. It's your language. It's garbage. We're going to try no talking to the judge in that gutter-type language. You'll have your guts for garters. You think about it. See you up by.
Okay, right. One can only do one's best after all.
Shuey, I have got no class prejudice, but that is just about unintelligible. It's a corrupt, debased slang. See the working classes, Shuey. They want to get themselves together and that, but eh?
Well, I blame the teachers, by the way.
Listen, see you, Shuey.
See you, Jazza.
Yes, yes. That's
Another pervasive myth is that the uneducated talk slang, dialect or Scots, while educated professional people speak only standard English. But at the country's foremost museum, the Scots of Buchan and Angus is the everyday language of top management. English has its uses too.
the last of it. There's just one or two labels to sort out. Okay? Right. We'll see you later then, Ian. Okay. Cheerio.
Well, it's a bit of mere certitude.
Aye.
Aye, Gavin. I was wondering if you could give us a rundown on what's going to be happening in the show next year out at the Agricultural Museum.
Aye. Well, there was 12 things. It's a thing I've discussed with John quite a bit. We was thinking on a fairly complete redisplay of the semi-permanent exhibition.
I do not stare as well as up.
Aye, well, if we can manage it, because I mean the whole thing hangs together.
How will you manage to get this theme about regional variety into the displays, Gavin?
Well, I think on the regional variation thing, you chase a certain theme. It's near thing that
Switching from one language to another is second nature to most Scots speakers.
I'm different from Gavin because when I'm speaking English, it sounds as if I'm speaking my own dialect anyway. So linguistic consciousness has always been part of my upbringing, and I think that the fact of speaking a dialect, and this must be true for anybody who speaks a dialect, anybody like that will be far more conscious of language and should theoretically be much readier to learn other languages. And this in turn, of course, helps international communication as well as communication within your own country.
Do you yourself speak other languages?
Yes, I can get by in several other languages. I know the Scandinavian, Danish in particular, and French I did at school. And most of the conferences I go to abroad are done in German, in fact, and a bit of Hungarian, things like that. I enjoy playing with language and treat it as a sort of hobby, but a functional hobby.
It's the badge of your identity. It shows that you are a Scotsman, and I still to learn that a Scotsman is unacceptable abroad because he hasn't a standard English voice.
There are some aspects of lots of local accents which I think are very unattractive. I mean, I say sentimental. You could go out into the street and you'd find somebody who says sentimental. Well, sentimental can't be understood. But equally, you could go down to London and you get a Cockney bus driver and he says, oh, I'm going down the road. Well, I would say I'm going down the road, and people understand that. But people other than Cockneys would find it very difficult to understand a Cockney, and they might find it ugly. I'm not for a single minute suggesting that everybody should speak standard English. I think that would be boring. I'm not in any way against local accents, but when it comes to the ability to be understood, I think standard English is quite important.
English is important as a world language, but it's another myth that speaking it with a Scottish accent renders it less comprehensible to foreigners. Why should promoting good English mean eradicating Scots, which is what we do when we limit our children's potential to be fully bilingual?
The local children mainly speak in their own Doric language when they come to school.
Is that changed when they come to school?
Yes, that changes very quickly when they come to school.
Why is that?
Well, it's just an accepted thing when they come to school that they speak standard English, and we teach in standard English.
Did that happen to you, and do you think it affects children, the fact that their home language isn't allowed in school?
I don't think it affects them too much. I had the same experience. I spoke in the Doric before I went to school, and then changed. I don't remember it being any problem, really.
I'm afraid it's disappearing. It's becoming more and more anglicised. It's getting mixed up with standard English, the standard English of schools and the pulpit and the press and television and so on. And as I say, the structure is broken down. People mix up the grammar. They mix up English grammar with Scots grammar. They sometimes say sair and sometimes they say soar. Even in my own Buchan, they lose vocabulary.
For example, a wee cousin of mine was going up into me, and I said to her, you don't need to go up to me, I'm for Hookman and all. And she said, pardon? So, you can, words like genepen are definitely dying out. Mm-hmm. I think that eventually the words like that will die out and it'll just be a funny accent left. I can see it definitely moving towards a standard Scottish English.
It looks as though genepen, talking proper, is steadily gaining ground in Ulster too.
Well, the remnant of the tongue's still there, although it's steadily dying out. I would say that my generation was a bit the last, maybe to hay the tongue, for there's words that has even died out in my lifetime.
With my gran, there's an awful big difference. And some words I've dropped out for what she would use, and some words I've picked up that she'd never have used in her lifetime.
Aye, what examples?
Well,
words that your gran would use?
Well, I would use like chanking, but she'd never have heard of that.
What does that mean?
That's when you're frozen to the bone.
Chanking?
But chanking. And so some words, like she'd use maybe drich, but I'd never used that. I'd never heard of that before.
There was another word for a phenomenon in the weather that...
Oh, aye, in the rainbow.
Aye.
A waterco. She used that, that was from her mother, that she got that for.
Ye wat voor nicht of the outramel. I saw yon antrin thing. A watergo with chittering licht I yont the own ding. And I thought of the last wild look ye gied afore ye died. There was nae reek of the Leverock's hoose that nicht and nae mine. But I had thought of that foolish licht ever since sign. And I think that maybe at last I ken what your look meant then.
MacDermot's dream of restoring Scots to its medieval glory can be realised only if the status of Scots changes and it's taught in schools. For most, that's a distant dream.
Anybody who wants to write wants to be read by as many people as possible. And there's no question that if you write specifically and only in Scots, you limit the audience. To be honest, you limit the audience within Scotland, because a lot of the purists are not in touch with the streets at all, because the kind of erosion I've been talking about does happen in the streets. I mean, in about 18 years of teaching, I saw a significant decline in words that were familiar to me when I was a kid and weren't to the pupils, who were working class pupils, that I was teaching. And I think to preserve words in a glass case is false.
Yet if the words were taught in broadcast, far from being in a glass case, they'd be universally accepted.
If we keep calling a wall, if we keep trying to impress on teachers and educationists that the dialects are part of our national heritage, they're part of our national identity as Scots, that they're part of our cultural tradition, that they're the vehicle of the splendid literature in Scots that there is, if we keep on trying to instill this into them, then it might make further progress. We might find them getting, as I say, beyond tolerance to active encouragement.
Where there's a will, there's a way, and you've got to cultivate the will. If you want to survive, you've got to want to survive. You've got to make up your mind that you're going to survive. And the only way to make Scots survive is to use it, to speak it. As I said before, if you don't speak a language, it dies. So the only way to keep it going is to speak it in season and out of season.
You see, we're a resilient kind of race, and we're beginning to head back a bit. In 5 years, seen the little ones in the village in Clet would have been speaking English. Now, the English are speaking the mother tongue, and that cheers me up a great bit. So you see, we're going to survive.
There's a value in Scots that you don't get in English, in the language itself. And what I would hope is that that value is simply transferred to the way you think. To put it very simply, I think Scots is like English in its underwear. You know, it loves to dismantle pretensions to the underwear so that you can't fake it, you can't be as hypocritical. I think it's very difficult to be pompous in Scots. If you think of the kind of words we use, it's enormously difficult to be airy-fairy or pompous in Scots. And what I would hope is that the long tradition of language we've had, whatever happens to it in the future, would have ingrained in us as a habit of thought that kind of attitude.
I suppose there's a time and a place for having to speak right English, but I wouldn't change for anybody, just with my pals or anything like that. I feel that it makes it me fae darful, speaking my way, no changing.